called it the granddaddy of them all, and which it was. Oh, they took care of us. We went down there for a couple of weeks and I hit all the events.
A definitely once-in-a-lifetime memory maker. The community, Ed Bain was the coach at that time, put together, I said we predate a GoFundMe page. I'm not sure where it was a huge surprise to Dad and the family as a whole. They had us staying at the Century Plaza, which was a hotel we no more would have stayed at than the Man in the Moon. It was something else. And we got to go to the Rose Bowl parade. They had it scheduled to go to the parade. They had us scheduled to go to Disneyland. Pete was practicing. We didn't get to see him. One of the players toured us, which it was a marvelous experience. It just was.
Plunkett to the air again, and Ohio State learns firsthand why the Stanford quarterback is the Heisman Trophy winner.
Plunkett obviously had a great game, and they hadn't seen a passing attack like that. I don't believe, not over in the Big Ten there. They thought they were just going to control the ball and just go up and down the field all day long against it, and it just didn't happen. And so ultimately, the score 27-17, we beat them by 10 points. And they had a couple of key drives, and we had one big stop on fourth down. I think kind of took the wind out of them. They thought for sure they were just going to roll right over us.
4th and 1 for the Buckeyes at the Stanford 20, but Brockington is stopped. No gain, and Stanford regains possession.
Rose Bowls are the number 2 and 3. Certainly the number 1 game of all time. We played state basketball tournament in 1968. We ended up we played West High.
There were over 10,000 in Bozeman at the field house. He had 5 points in the overtime, which was the difference. I think he had the game-winning shot. Mom cut these and they had a party at the house.
So of all the sporting events that I've been in all my life, that was the greatest victory. They had beaten us twice during the season, and they had the better basketball team. As far as basketball players, and my dad being the coach and me being on the team, and we upset West High. You can't top it. Woody Hayes was their coach, and he really had it in for Stanford. I was West Coast, and a couple of our guys even had, sideburns, I think, or kind of long hair. And I think he wanted to beat Stanford more than any other team. They were going through 2-a-day, 3-a-day practices. We came down to the Rose Bowl, and we hadn't been there in 20 years. So Coach Ralston just pretty much turned us loose. We went to Disneyland, and we went to SeaWorld, and we went to MGM, went to the studios. Every side trip they had, he said, hey, go for it. So we had a great time, and we worked hard. We worked hard before we got there. Good coaching, believe me. We had our coaching staff was Ralston and Mike White. 4 or 5 of those coaches went on to be head coaches in the National Football League. So believe me, we just followed the game plan they put out, and they had us in the right place at the right time. But you got to hand it a lot of that, I would, to the coaching staff. Plus, we had the talent, and plus we had Plunkett. That was a huge key. We had good ball players, and a number of guys went out into the pros. Plus, we had Jim Plunkett throwing the football. Randy Vataha, wide receiver. Bob Moore played with the Raiders for a number of years. So we had a lot of guys went on to the pros. Jeff Seaman was a great middle linebacker. Went on with the Minnesota Vikings for a number of years. And myself, I was drafted in the first round in the second pick. Dave Tipton played in the league for a number of years. Defensive end, had a great game. Same as Ohio State. I don't want to go down the list of their names. They had all kinds of them that were all pro that went on later on. Jack Tatum was a great defensive player. And it was fun. And going on in the pros years later, playing on teams with a number of those guys or playing against them. Earlier in the year, we played USC, and they'd beaten Stanford every year for years. And they had a great football team. I think they're ranked number 4 or 5 in the country. And we played them, upset them, and they had a group that all their players, they took them down. They made these big posters. They called themselves the Wild Bunch after the movie, the Western movie. And just as a spoof, I kind of came up with the name Thunder Chickens. And ultimately, it caught on with the press.
10 plays into the game, the Buckeyes get their first taste of that Stanford defense fronted by the famed Thunder Chickens.
Where the name came from, I don't know. I heard I thought there was a motorcycle gang up in Billings called the Thunder Chickens, but I ran into some of those guys later on. They said, no, that wasn't our name. The whole story is my grandmother, there was a huge thunderstorm, and I had to go out and collect the eggs, and went out to get the eggs. And inside the barn, there was something I'd never seen before, and it was a peacock. So that's apparently maybe because of the thunder and the chickens, we came up with the name. Who knows? So I don't know. It was a spoof, and we had a lot of fun with it. Absolutely, Dave McNally, and I was just blessed to kind of be, from Montana, from Billings, and a lot of great athletes have come out of Billings and come out of Montana. Like I say, two in my family, my dad and his younger brother, Millen. And of course, my dad was the coach at Billings Senior High School and my dad's in the Hall of Fame at the University of Montana, basketball, football, and track for 3 years. And was a tremendous athlete.
Dad always was the first to go to college, and he went on a football scholarship. We were Grizz fans. He was a Grizzly great, so that football ran in the family.
My dad played pro ball for the old, they were the Cleveland Rams at that time. Right before the war, then went into the war, and then got wounded and couldn't come back and play. Then his younger brother, Millen Lazetich, went on All-American at Michigan, and then he went on to play in the pros. And so, yeah, I had some family history and heritage that try to, inspired me when I was young. And, there were some characters in our family. I go back to the old ball players. I was fortunate enough to play with a lot of, older veteran guys. I even played with Johnny Unitas in San Diego. And Johnny Unitas was the greatest guy in the world. I mean, clean cut, hard working, Will Roger type. And then we brought in a bunch of outlaws to go with them. My Uncle Steve had a bar in Billings, Ambec Club 90. And there's a good picture of him in there. And I got Dick Butkus to come up for a golf tournament for Special Olympics. So I got Dick Butkus, and there's a good picture of us and my Uncle Steve at the bar, and Dick Butkus, and Doug Betters was a great football player for the University of Montana. So all three of us were at that golf tournament. It's hard to even imagine because you always had the camaraderies. Every game you played in the Pac-8, every school knew every school, and it was a big game. You had a lot of history behind it. It meant something. All the games were, and now there is no real allegiance or to a conference or to the history. Yeah, but it's good. It kind of opened it up, and I think it gave a lot of these ball players. But again, at that age coming out, and then all of a sudden being looking at all these schools and whatnot, and you can transfer to another school and you're being paid, and hey, I hand it to those guys. They were way ahead of I would have been at that time. But I certainly, if I was playing today, I'd have some great fun and have a great time. And I can't imagine going from one school to another. Hell, I was so intimidated and frightened just to be at one school, Stanford. And then all of a sudden, I think it's interesting these young athletes have the courage to go to another team, and they're making some money. And hey, good for them. By God, go for it. Going through that period of college unrest and the Vietnam War, and there were a lot of changes being made in the country at that time. And coming from Montana, there was a lot of education to be had, and a lot of it was outside of the classroom. So thank God for my education. A lot of it was outside of the classroom as opposed to in. And I ultimately, for my mother, she was adamant. I graduated with a degree in political science, and so she was happy. And I was happy. We had a great time, great experience there.
As a mom, she kept saying, Pete, now you're tending to your studies, aren't you? And the degree was really important.
be in a crowd of 100,000, and it's an experience, obviously, we'll never forget.
Married the whole time.
Well, that's true, Steve. I've been married with my wife for 54 years, so she was at both Rose Bowls. My mom and dad and my sisters and everybody came. Everybody had a blast. A family reunion from that standpoint.